everybody. This is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. This is Echoes of War. I'm joined here by my co-host, Gaurav. How are you?
Hey Craig, great to be here and really looking forward to today's episode where we don't focus on real wars.
Yeah, so to the delight of, I would hope, many amongst our audience members, and to the horror of those who don't want to hear this shit anymore, we're now going to be covering the Second Age of Tolkien's Legendarium, so Lord of the Rings. It's going to be the same as the last time. It's kind of an episode where Gaurav had written up a bunch of questions related to the Second Age, and I'll just try to answer them. But before we jump into it, I just want to remind everybody that if you're not joining us on YouTube, you're going to miss about 23 tabs on my Chrome right now of artwork that's going to be used, as well as quite a few maps of Middle-earth and Númenor, for that matter. And I don't think there'll be clips in this episode, but in the future we'll try to add more clips to, just kind of make this more like a documentary feeling, less so of a podcast. So please join us on YouTube. And if you'd like to further support us, please check our YouTube membership out, or you can check out the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series. It's about 38 episodes and ongoing at this point. You also get early access to all the content I make. For example, my second volume looking into how anime depicts the Pacific War is up there, and it's going to be going public in a week from now. And you get access, of course, to the polls. So you get voting rights for the subjects I will tackle next. But yeah, stating all of that, I'm going to pull up one of many maps that I hunted
Yeah,
down.
I think it's a good way we start is literally we take it what in the aftermath of the War of Wrath.
Oh, perfect. So here, I actually have, it's not a great looking map, but we're going to share this one. So, for a lot of you who maybe aren't as knowledgeable about the entire legendarium of Tolkien's world, it was in a historical context, there's 4 ages. Actually, there's technically kind of more than that, but we'll just break it down by the 4 ages. So in the first age, when all of these beings enter Arda and a lot of shit hits the fan, there was a cataclysm at the end of the first age, because Morgoth had become so strong and he nearly conquered all of what was Middle Earth at that point. And there was a
And
ultimate battle to
he's
finally
pretty
end his
strong for
tyranny.
being pretty weak.
Yeah. So actually, I do have some artwork known as the War of Wrath. You can think of it as Avengers Endgame, I guess. It's like every single dastardly beast that Morgoth had created, his dragons, his Balrogs, all the fell beasts, all of his orc minions, even his men of darkness. So these are, you can call them Easterlings, but they're not the Easterlings that we would see in the second and third age. There is a difference. They're all there. The host of the West finally shows up, so we have potentially some members of the Valor. It's never really explicitly stated whether there's any Mire or Valor involved, but anyways, we
I
have
would
all.
definitely put my bet on Tulkas being there.
If Tulkas was there, I think he would have wrote it down, because Tulkas would have bullied Morgoth and like wrestled him. But
I mean, come on, Tulkas wanting to fight Morgoth. He's
yeah,
never gonna turn that down.
yeah. But so the host, they arrive. It's a battle that rages forever. It's intense. As you can see from this depiction, it's just complete chaos. Everything is fighting everything. And the war is so destructive, it actually destroys a large portion of Middle Earth. Actually, technically, the largest dragon that Morgoth ever created, I guess created is a bad word, corrupted into being, he actually falls upon the large mountain structures, completely destroying most of Middle Earth. And there is a depiction of what that would have looked like. So if you're looking at this image now, audio listeners, I'm sorry. To the right is what you would collectively, you can see as the Middle Earth from the second and third ages perspective. Over to the left is completely been destroyed. It's now underneath the Great Sea. And you can see that there's remnants of kind of like what was the Iron Hills in the north are still there, touching upon the north of Middle Earth, coming here. There's like parts that kind of are still there that overlap a little bit. But yeah, a lot of that's been completely destroyed. And yeah, it was a cataclysm, to be sure. I think, I don't know, from what point do you want to understand the differences? Like what happens after the War of Wrath? You're like, are you keen about the formation of the world or like the new
Yeah,
peoples
I
or?
think let's maybe talk about the formation of the three major powers, you could say. So,
Okay.
what happens to Sauron? We know he was like Morgoth's right hand man during the first age, and obviously the formation of the Númenor and the Noldor Elf Kingdom as well, like, their aftermath.
Hmm.
Because,
So
you know, I really find it pretty awesome that Elrond is family to the Númenórean king.
So here, how about actually instead of going right to Sauron, I will go to the formation of the other thing. So here's a map of the Second Age. As you can see, it looks very much like anybody seeing a map of Middle Earth during the Third Age. It's identical except for one key difference. Over here, the bottom left-hand corner is the island of Númenor. So during the War of Wrath, the humans, the men who had remained faithful to the Valar, were given a gift. This gift was twofold. They were given this new island where they could reside, and they were gifted, I guess you could call it, longer lifespans. They were not immortal. They would live a few, like 100+ years extra or something like that, you can call it. But you could say that this was both a gift and a curse in some ways. Now, in the greater mythology, we'll call it, of Tolkien's work, probably the most important element is for, we'll call it the quote unquote good guys. All of them should embrace death. That's what, because Tolkien was deeply influenced by Catholicism. So all of the characters who willingly will do what they must, go to battle, whatever, they embrace death itself, they end up having good outcomes. All those who fear death or try to prolong their life more and more, they have bad outcomes. And that's
It's
emblematic of
it,
the story of Númenor.
yeah, and you could also see this, right? It's so many mythologies how they praise, like, the warrior who is willing to stare death straight in the face. It's not only Catholicism, but many different faiths.
Of course, yeah.
And definitely King Theoden at Pelennor, the
Mm-hmm.
greatest scene in cinema history. I don't care what anyone else says.
Yeah. So the Battle of Pelennor Fields is based off of well, there's historical context that we'll get into in the Third Age. The Third Age is like it's so full of actual history, whereas the Second Age, Númenor. I mean, people can kind of already tell it's King Arthur. It's Camelot in a lot of ways. It's Avalon. It's a little bit of that. It's Atlantis as well. All of Númenor's imagery that Tolkien wrote about is basically like it's Atlantean. They wear kind of like fish-like armor. They are themselves Marines. They're seafaring people. Yeah, but it descends into the story of like the lost city of
Asian
Avalon as
mythology,
well.
I love the Atlanteans.
There you go. So yeah, here's a map. It's not very detailed of Númenor, which has kind of these major provinces with one in the middle. That's where the royalty is and everything. And I'm not going to get too much into the history of Númenor because I mean it's extensive. For those who are fans of the Wizards and Warriors channel on YouTube, I'm the guy who wrote that 12,000 word history of Númenor. I think it was. It's very long, and I wanted to narrate it, but they didn't let me. A little butthurt about that. Anyways, so Númenor is formed. The Edain, which are the faithful men who reside in Númenor, become the Númenóreans. They have longer lifespan. They are greater than the average man. They're literally like 8 feet tall, so they're huge. They're much stronger. They develop this new culture. It's a blend of a lot of things from our history. It's interesting. I mean, what else would you like me to say about kind of just the formation of Númenor? I'll say this: the Edain are not the only people who reside in Númenor. There is another subcategory of humans, the Druidae. I think it's how they're pronounced. They do come over, and yeah, there's not much talked about them, but they are there as well. So it's not just the three houses of men that reside in Númenor. Do you want me to continue about Númenor, or do you want me to talk about the other kingdoms? Did I lose you, Gareth? Is he having connection issues? Well, I'll just keep rambling. So I'm bringing up back a map of the second age here. Númenor, of course, is where a lot of the faithful men end up. The men who stay behind kind of fall into two categories. There's what we call the middlemen, who reside all over the parts of Middle Earth. What are you doing here? Oh, sorry.
I have
Anyways, they
no
reside
idea.
all.
Now my internet dubbed off on me, so
Oh, yeah, you're back. Okay. Anyways, I'll just continue. So yeah, the middlemen reside all over parts of. If you're looking over here, Eriodor, Rovanian are major clusters of the middlemen, and of course, there's men that reside all the way in the east and the south. So people would know them as the
so the
Easterlings and
middlemen
the Southrons.
we could call them like the predecessors of the Rohirrim.
Yeah, they're the predecessors of the Northmen, and the Northmen become the Rohirrim. I mean, there's a whole. I actually like. I wrote because I write for Kings and Generals Fantasy Channel, Wizards and Warriors. So everything that has to do with the armies, the culture, and the histories of that, I wrote. So I have a whole thing on the development of the Northmen. All that, if people are interested, it's very complex. It deals with multiple different groups that emerge. So the Rohirrim, the Men of Dale, and even the Bjornings and stuff, they all kind of come from the same people. Yeah, and
I
then you
think
have.
one of the coolest things I've just discovered about the Second Age, the fact that Numenor's first king is the brother of Elrond,
Yeah, of course.
because as we mentioned, one of the gifts that the Valar bestowed upon uh, Arundel and his sons was the sons get to choose whether they want to be with the race of men or the race of elves. And as we know, Elrond chose the elves, and his brother chose to be with the men. And he would be, the founder of the first king of Númenor, which to me makes so that means there is a biological family relationship between Aragorn and
Yes.
Arwen.
And when great, 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 great. Yeah, exactly.
Very long, because I think it was Elendil who was married to the uh, daughter of the last king of Númenor.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how and we know Aragorn descends from Elendil and
Hmm.
Isildur. So there's that very long lineage.
And Elrond, he ends up marrying the daughter of Galadriel. And yeah, it is like if you look at the family trees, yeah, it gets weird. And when Aragorn and Arwen, when they come together, they actually close the ring, you could say, because it's kind of like the coming of the old lineage comes all the way back. So it's like, it was fate, I guess you could say. And speaking of Elrond, of course, we were talking about the formation of Númenor, where all the men go. But as for Elrond and the survivors, so these are going to be exclusively of Noldor and Teleri background, because the Vanyar, who did come from the Undying Lands to face Morgoth, they just go back. They don't come to Middle Earth. It's the only time I guess they set foot on Middle Earth was during that battle.
Yeah, I guess for them, they were just following their lords.
Yep. So they go back, excuse me, and that leaves kind of a much smaller population of elves to reside in. If you're looking at this map right now, the area of Linden, and it's actually kind of very similar to the first age, where the Falathim, who are the people who kind of are the seagoing elves in Middle Earth, are all the way on the western side. Now it's Linden that kind of takes that, and they have it's the old Master of the Great Havens there, who's the same guy who had been there during the first age, watching over that part.
I'm pretty sure there's gonna be quite a bit of animosity for a little bit, considering the sounding.
Yeah, so for those who know the first age, the Noldor were kind of cursed for coming over. They did a lot of bad things, and yeah, now all the elves are kind of uh, forgive and forget a little bit. Everyone's kind of coming together, and there's a little bit of a migration. So if you're looking at this map, Eriador, which is just a little bit to the east of this area that's Linden, the elves gradually come over and they start migrating. It's actually Galadriel and her husband that are the first to kind of navigate this world. And they do end up finding out that there were elves who, were all the way in the east this whole time. They didn't heed the call of the Valor. They had just come as far as what you see as Rovanian.
Would they be the Dark Elves?
No, 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 they're not. These elves are, by the way, undergo different names. People would know them as like the Legolas's people, like the woodland elves or the sylvan elves and
The
such.
Mirkwood and such.
Mirkwood elves. So there's two large groups. There's those of Lothlorien and those of Mirkwood. They're the same type of elf. They just end up in two different kingdoms because later on the force of Dol Guldur disrupts them from ever merging. They merge at the very end of the third age. In the fourth age, they become one. But they're in the second age. There are very large populations of elves that haven't seen the light of the Undying Lands and the tree and all that. So they're a little weaker than the Noldor and the others and stuff, but they're still elves.
Yes,
And
and I'm pretty sure even them, they're still more powerful than Númenórean.
um, yeah,
But I think that so the Dark Elves still reside in the caverns where they were first
the Dark
born.
Elves are mixed amongst some, and
All right,
but they're never a large.
I know because I really like how Tolkien describes the Dark Elves not as evil, right? Like in many other
No,
fantasies
no,
tend
no,
to
yeah,
use the term Dark Elf. They don't practice any dark magic, evil magics. They are just the ones who never went to the
yeah,
light of the Valar.
yeah, exactly. They're more relevant in the first age, because there's that famous dark elf that makes fabulous weapons and such. But in the second age, it's like they're not even talked about anymore. They're imbued within the Sylvian elves and all that. But yeah, so that covers kind of just the basics of this world. There's middlemen, there's the elves who are kind of migrating around. There's still evil men to the east and the south. They don't play that much of a large role in the second age. They're there, but it's not as large as in the third age. And oh yeah, of course, you want to talk about Sauron. So
I was literally just about to say, let's talk about the real mastermind, someone with an actual plan, and not an emo kid with daddy issues.
so I actually have a list in front of me of questions that Gaurav had provided, and I'm gonna accidentally answer a lot of them with this because just talking about kind of Sauron coming back answers a bunch of your questions. But as everyone who's watching this on YouTube can see, I am using from that video game, yes, that people either loved or hated, Shadow of War, the image of Sauron's fair form because he is a
I
shapeshifter.
really like Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor.
I love that game so much.
Uh,
Anyways,
and
but,
yeah, Celebrimbor, I'm just saying this in advance. You deserve that horrible death you suffer in the game.
he's made to be a lot more evil in the game than like he is in the actual books. But yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm still sticking to the game version.
I mean, he's pure evil in the game. He's just a dick.
It's just like
But
pure revenge. Whereas, like, Talion is like still a loyal son of Gondor.
yeah, so War of Wrath, Sauron was Morgoth's second lieutenant, his second in command, we'll call it. And when everything ended,
I think,
and
if I'm not mistaken, he was ahead of ranking in terms of who Morgoth trusted, even
yes,
more than Gothmog.
yeah, and when Gothmog dies, then certainly Sauron is, he's the only number two.
Yeah, and he's already the right hand man, and that has been going on since even Feanor led the Great
Mm,
Exodus.
yeah. So all of the more powerful beings that were involved in the War of Wrath that survived, they flee for their lives. So Durin's Bane, the Balrog that the dwarves uncover, he goes and literally just hides under a mountain. And tries to flee, but he's captured by the Valar. And they basically demand that he apologizes and redeems himself. Instead of doing that right at the beginning, he kind of tries to bide his time. He says that, he has changed back to his original form because Sauron used to be, one of the of the Mire, and he simply wants to. He says he himself believes he wants to remedy the damage that was done to Arda by Morgoth. So he goes about for a little bit, trying to fix the world, and he avoids what he sees as judgment from the Valar. So he hides from them.
So he
Yeah.
avoids prosecution.
Yeah, yeah. In essence, he's just trying not to get arrested. After a while, he finds himself hiding in the east. Now, after a long time, and by the way, he's not so much Sauron at this point. He's Marion, which was his original name, because this is before he turned evil. He really does believe that he's turned like a new leaf and he's going back to what his original purpose is. But after a while, he believes that the Valar have just forgotten about him, and he thinks that the Valar are not looking at Middle Earth anymore, which he's not wrong. They're kind of laissez-faire a little bit here. So he turns back, to his his evil ways, and now he believes that, since Morgoth is gone, he can take up the mantle as the new Dark Lord. Now, just to
And
explain, yeah,
I would just say, he actually does believe he is someone who's going to bring order and semblance to the chaos that marked the first age of Middle Earth.
yeah,
And I think he genuinely believes that, and way more calculating and strategic in his plans, as we will see multiple times over the course of the second and third age.
yep. And I do apologize to the audience. By answering about 5 questions that were written by Karov, I'm kind of going through like the history of Sauron's rise, and I'll get to what those questions were later. But to kind of explain, like Karov was alluding to, all the characters at the highest end, the Valar and the Maiar, that Tolkien had made, they all kind of have these traits, like they have these purposes, what they do. You have Aule, who's like the big blacksmith one. He teaches the dwarves, and he ends up being one of the guys who teaches Sauron, ironically. There's all sorts of Tulkas is this strong guy, Anway is like, blah blah. You have Orome, who's the hunter. They all have these traits.
And Melkor was the only one that did not have one particular trait. He was jack
Yeah.
of all trades.
Jack of all trades, but master of none. That's an old trope too.
Can we say master of hating the Iluvatar?
Yes. Hating daddy. So Morgoth had a lot of issues. Sauron, he was a order bringer. He loved to not have chaos. He wanted to make things perfect. He's that's his desire. He's like a great administrator or something, like a bureaucracy. He wants everything to be perfect. Now,
Sounds like a particular man.
Yeah, when Morgoth, or sorry, when he was Melkor, corrupted other higher beings, he twisted whatever their purpose was to be something that's evil. So what he did with Sauron is he twisted him into believing that he had to take over Middle Earth so that he could bend it to his will and fix everything that was damaged. The real
It's
difference
kind of
between
like, take it and burn it down yourself so that you can build it in the perfect order that you deem worthy.
the real difference between Morgoth and Sauron is Morgoth wanted to destroy Arda. He simply doesn't even believe things should exist because he wants to be the guy who creates everything. So he wants to destroy it. Sauron doesn't want to destroy the world. He is perfect. He perfectly is happy with the world. He just wants it to bend to his will. So he just wants to take it over, conquer it. So that's kind of the real difference between them.
And Sauron doesn't have daddy issues. He doesn't want, because let's not kid ourselves. A big part of why Morgoth hates the elves and hates Arda is the creators of who was the creator of the two. That was the Iluvatar, and he completely resented his father.
And another thing, Morgoth already was aware that there was Valar eyes on him, and the more he used his power, the more he brought them into coming over and doing something about it. Whereas Sauron knows, because all the Maiar know this, like Gandalf, Saruman, all of these beings, they understand that if they withhold using their greater power, the Valar will not do anything. They'll never interfere in Middle Earth. But if they go over and above, then they might incur the wrath. So Sauron actually works
by
within
that logic,
the framework.
If Sauron in Lord of the Rings movies in the Third Age, if he used a lot of his higher power, so would we see like a host from Valinor just coming over the Great Divide and just wreaking havoc to Mount Doom?
Yeah, no, that's what would happen, but he never does. So despite, everything that Sauron does, he does it within kind of this, we'll say, the rules of the game, Whereas, Gandalf is the same. Gandalf and Saruman, they have rules where they're not allowed to release their greater power. So yeah, they're all kind of playing with this.
It's kind of crazy that even though they're not even showing their greater power, that they're still so incredibly powerful. Like, if like, I think if you just see like that scene from the War of the Last Alliance in the movies when Sauron just comes, like, isn't he like just swatting away companies of men and elves, like as if they are just nothing, they don't
Yeah,
exist.
of course, it looks extravagant, but when I'm talking about power, it's the power to change Arda. So the great sin of Morgoth is he's like creating mountains and making all sorts of destruction and things rise up, and he's manipulating like the earth itself. Whereas, like if Sauron breeds orcs or something, that's not on the same level. So he never does anything. He never
He
goes
does it
too much.
it's more sustainable, if you will. So it's not even a drain on his power because he spreads it over and builds up over time, which is why you would see, right? He spends so much time biding and knowing when to attack. It's actually a pretty admirable trait in the patience, because if it was Morgoth, oh, you would have had war in like 100 years, while Sauron would be willing to wait 1500 years.
Yep. Just gonna pull up the map again. Sauron, we're talking like Second Age, about 500 SA, you would say. He's working in the east and the south, so he's trying to cultivate the Haradrim and the Easterlings, and they come to fear him as kind of a god king. And he helps. He gives them knowledge, how to build towns, walls of stone, how to arm themselves with iron weapons. But soon the Númenóreans begin colonizing the coasts of Middle Earth. They
And
start
that is
off.
where that's where the foundations of the kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor.
Yeah, the very early foundations. They begin to they're just exploring Middle Earth because they're banned from going west. They can't go to the Undying Lands. So eventually they start going around the east. They're the great mariners. They have the ships. They found
Actually,
all sorts of
I'm
places.
sorry. This is like a question I did not even ask you. Uh, it's pretty interesting that men are not allowed to go to Valinor, because if we take it that the lands of the Valar are for the beings of Iluvatar, right? You have the Valar, you have the elves Vanir, who are their faithful. And we know that barring the dwarves, men were the legitimate children of Iluvatar as much as the elves. So it's pretty crazy that even in the second age that they were not permitted. I can understand, like, after certain events that take place, why, but the first half of the second age, them not being able to do it, it's a bit strange, in my opinion.
No, it's because of the nature of men. Men are the only ones who die, and they go to the halls of Mandos, and then they go to this unknown beyond. So the elves don't know what that is. The dwarves don't either, by the way. The dwarves are just told that they're going to show up, and then they'll be told where they go. They don't actually know if they die or not. So it's
Well,
kind of
to be
funny.
fair, the dwarves were not created by the hands of the Iluvatar.
Exactly. But yeah, so they're not allowed the Undying Lands, and they start venturing east, and they found places like if Umbar, Longdeer, Tharbad, just about everywhere. They visit Linden. They make they befriend the elves, of course, and such. And Sauron, they're coming south. He sees them, and he now is becoming aware of Númenor and the Númenóreans, and he's terrified. They're unbelievably powerful, and they're starting to mingle with the middlemen, who Sauron is
How,
trying to control.
if, like, I think it could be a good idea, like, if you were to just say, if we rate the Númenóreans as a 10 on 10 in terms of, say, combat prowess, durability, and all, right, as
It's
warriors.
10. It's 10 on
No,
10.
no, no. If we were to rate them as a 10, what would you rate the the middlemen?
In the grand scheme of things, in Middle Earth, because they're facing things like orcs and stuff. I mean, it depends on which middlemen, all honestly, but middlemen are kind of like a five or a six, because the Eothid who become the Rohirrim, they're very strong. They're like like an 8.
Because I remember reading like orcs are really like cannon fodder troops, even
Yes.
to middlemen. you could have like even like a standard Haradrim warrior would be able to take on dozens of orcs with ease.
Absolutely, because orcs are they're like described to have crooked legs. You know, they're
They're
messed up.
corrupted.
Yeah, they're
It's
corrupted,
I know
and
the
they use
movies show
crooked
them
weapons.
as a bit competent because even Urukai are not as much more powerful than a standard orc.
Urukai are on the level of men, I would guess. You would say, yeah.
But yeah, so the standard man could just destroy, like if you put one company of middlemen and tell them to go up against like a couple of regiments worth of orcs, the men are winning with ease.
Yeah,
And
but
Númenóreans are just gonna walk through them.
yeah, just to describe to people, the reason why like Númenóreans are described to be 8 feet tall, and they use phalanx formations to fight, and it said that they outrange their opponents with the span of their arms so much that they're just stabbing down at the orcs with their shields, so the orcs can't even face them. It's so ridiculous. And they're just, I'll describe it like this: they're basically like Captain America. They don't even use horses for logistics to like move great distances. They just march with everything on their backs, and at one point they land in basically Umbar and they just march on Mordor. It's insane. So they're godlike people. There's nothing that can face them. And yeah,
I think when we get to a certain event, I think that it becomes better illustrated there.
yeah. But yeah, so Sauron is rightfully terrified of Numenor. He can't contest them, and he ends up fortifying Mordor. So this is, it's in SA 1000 when he builds Barad-dûr, his great tower, and he's trying to consolidate this, this place that has kind of mountains on all sides. It's a pretty defensive position, and no one is aware that he's returned because he's been hiding this whole time, and he makes sure that no one's aware. He's really in the shadows. He's trying to make sure his armies don't get out of hand. And his first play, because he wants to conquer Middle Earth, is actually to play nice. So he puts on this disguise, Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and he goes out and he tries to befriend the elves, and mix and mingle with them. And for those who watch the terrible show Rings of Power, it tells kind of that story where he finds one Celebrimbor in Eredor, and he tries to get, to work with Celebrimbor to make Rings of Power. I don't know. Should we go into the rings now?
Yeah, I think maybe just before we do, because we know that it's around this time, just coincidentally, that the men of Numenor start, losing their faith to the Valar.
Yes. So
I
here, let
think
me.
it's setting the context for what's to come.
So I'm not going to go through the history of Numenor, but for lack of better words, there's 2 different types of people that start to emerge in Numenor after a lengthy part of its history. One group remains faithful to their gift, faithful to the Valar, who had gifted them everything, and they understand that they need to live their extended life, but die with grace. So this can be seen with how they pick how the ruler comes about. So the ruler of Numenor is supposed to give up his title to probably his son after he is too old and he doesn't have all of his faculties. So you can think of like President Biden, for example. Before you become too demented, you give up the title, and
Or
most
at
of the
least not
Numenorean
like
kings do.
typical kings where you are on the throne till you literally die or
Yeah,
get killed.
exactly. So in the early part of Numenor's history, most of the kings, they get old and they hand it over when the time comes, and they embrace death with grace. Eventually, there starts to be a turn. Gradually, some kings become a little resentful of things. They're resentful first of the elves, who have, immortality as far as they can see. They're a little resentful of the Undying Lands, where they're not allowed to go to, and they don't understand why that they have to have a mortal life. Even though they live like 150 or 200 years old or something, they start to resent this. And then some of these kings start getting corrupted by that resentment, and they don't give up their scepter at the right time, and it starts to get bad. And then 2 groups are basically formed. The first group was the one I mentioned, those who were faithful. They're called the faithful. The other group go under the nomener of the Kingsmen. And I mean, I'm jumping into the history a bit. They eventually become so corrupted by this fear of death that they want to rebel against the Valar.
This is
And
gonna be like the future foundation for Sauron and after an event which we'll talk about. But the king who started this was the 13th king of Númenor, uh, named Tar Adenamir. I'm sorry if I butchered the
the
name,
names are hard, yeah.
but or Adenamir the Great. He is the first king that openly, questions the ban of the Valar, as it's called. And this is where you start to see the sundering between the men of Númenor, where you have the Edain, the faithful, and then you'll have the Kingsmen, as you rightly call
Yeah. It also has to do with the language. The Númenóreans speak, the languages of the elves and stuff, but they also come up with this other and Andaic, I think it's pronounced, language. And the Kingsmen eventually favor using this language and calling themselves their names in that language. So the future kings who are Kingsmen who drift further and further away from the Valar, they start naming themselves like Arpharazon and such. This other language and stuff. So yeah, there's this great divide. It's kind of like a civil war that never really sees a
it. You can call
war,
it like a
more of persecution.
political. You can call it like a
Yeah,
political shadow war.
yeah. Horrible stuff
But
happens. We'll get into it
yeah,
later.
but I think now the main thing about the Second Age, the rings.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to put up a picture of that of the forging of the rings, but
One moment.
yeah, while you do that, I'll just stop sharing. So Sauron knows ringcraft because Morgoth understood ringcraft, and he starts working with Celebrimbor, just like in the show. If people have watched Rings of Power, and they decide that they're going to forge the Rings of Power. And in essence, the reason why the elves want to forge these rings is they want to prolong their waning, as it's called, because despite the fact they're immortal, they're losing power in Middle Earth because they need to leave Middle Earth and come to the Undying Lands. And to delay that process, they basically forged the three elven rings of power. And these basically cause everything around them to just offset time, is the best way to call it.
Yeah, this is I think the three rings of the elves. And Sauron was, as we said, right? He wanted order but had a strategic mind. And that's why when he puts on the friendly avatar, goes and socializes with the elves, he's pretty charming and effective at it. And that's how he does get into the tutelage of Celebrimbor. Now, I know we were joking about him when we were discussing a bit about Shadow of Mordor and all, but Celebrimbor at this time is considered a master smith.
Yes.
I think
One of the greatest
I
amongst the Noldor.
I think you would just say that in terms of like ability, you would put him just behind Feanor. Yeah, right? Feanor was the
Yeah.
greatest at everything.
Yeah, Fëanor was
And
the greatest, yeah.
so Celebrimbor is there, and Sauron does actually help him in the crafting of the rings that were not the One Ring, right?
Yeah.
The
Although
because
Sauron has nothing to play with. The three elven rings are made independently of the rest, but they still do abide by the One Ring. If the One Ring is destroyed, they will lose power as well.
true, but it feels like he just somehow was able to imprint some of that personality of control within it, so that they
Yeah.
obey the One Ring. I think that's the best way to put it. Because
Yes.
see, Sauron's objectives when he created the rings was he's gonna proxy rule the world first, corrupt the leaders, because these rings are gonna be given to the greatest of each race.
Yeah. But Sauron legitimately believed he could get the elves to join his cause. That's something that people might be surprised to hear. He didn't think that he had to completely destroy them at the beginning. He eventually comes to that conclusion when they don't abide by him. But in the meantime, what they're working on is the rings of power. So, there's 19 rings, and you've all heard the the intro to the movies, the nine rings to men. And the rings to the dwarves and such, and these are given as these gifts, and unbeknownst to everyone, Sauron has corrupted these rings because he is secretly working on the One Ring, which is going to dominate them all. and everybody who was given these rings. I'm just going to bring back my map.
I've just shown the famous One Ring.
Yeah, go for it.
But I think his idea was right. Like, as I was saying, it's a proxy rule. He's
Mhm.
going to control and dominate the minds of the leaders who are going to be wearing these rings. And through them, he's going to manipulate the entire continent that is not under his direct control.
Mhm.
Mordor, East, and South are completely under him.
Yeah,
It is just
you're right.
the West and the Elven lands that he does not have any.
Hey guys, this is Craig from the Pacific War Channel. Please don't forget to check out my YouTube membership or my Patreon account over at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel, where you can join the ranks and gain access to a hell of a lot of goodies. At the base minimum, you get access to the exclusive monthly podcast, early access to all of my content, voting rights for what subjects I will tackle next, and at higher tiers, I have much more goodies to come. So please click that link and check it out.
Direct control, and it would be pretty difficult for him to get that.
Yeah. So he goes actually back to Mordor to Mount Doom, where he forges the One Ring. And when he puts on the One Ring, it immediately sends a message to the 3 Elven rings that basically it just displays his trickery and what he has done. So they're all 3 of the ring bearers become aware of what Sauron has done, and they know that he's an enemy. Much to their, not surprised, because Galadriel and everyone but Celebrimbor seems to not like Anatar, and they kind of like were suspicious of him. But Celebrimbor fell for it, and he feels probably ashamed. But Sauron has now openly declared himself. He's at Mordor, and he's going to wage a war against the elves. And actually, I got some artwork of this. So he invades Eriador. And it's not just the elves. He also goes after the Northmen. So he's sending, waves upon waves of northern orcs mostly, because I don't know if I mentioned this. He is trying to cultivate these orcs that Morgoth had corrupted. And there's actually different groups of orcs. The northern orcs, or the orcs of the Misty Mountains and such, they're tribal. Ever since the War of Wrath, they kind of like formed their own little leaders, and they're not unified. But they see Sauron, and he's in his fair form, and they decide that he's a leader worthwhile, and they do join him. The Eastern orcs are a completely different group. When they see Sauron in his fair form, they mock him, and they don't follow him. They actually think he's a bitch, which is kind of funny. So they don't
But
respect him.
I mean, orcs, they just really respect strength.
Yeah. So
It's
they
kind of
actually
like
tell him
if you
that
go
off.
back to Fingolfin's duel with Morgoth, the fact that the orcs are never sang about their leader's victory. In a way, it's really the honor to Fingolfin that Morgoth is so embarrassed by it.
So basically, with mostly using these northern orcs and some of his easterlings, he comes out of the Black Gates. I mean, he has trolls as well, of course. I don't know how many, and he invades Eriador, and they are not prepared for this. Even though Celebrimbor and the others have tried to put up defenses, it's not going to go good. And this is in late 1600s. He kind of just swarms everywhere. He is met by a vanguard army that's led by Celeborn and such, and they're just pushed aside. Perhaps I should bring back my map. I don't know. This isn't that detailed as far as a map is concerned.
You'll have to scroll up to the north of the map.
Yeah. So they're getting the elves are just getting absolutely wrecked. In the meantime, they send word to Númenor seeking aid from the Númenóreans to help them fend off this, but in the meantime, they're on their own. Most of Eriador is completely just overrun, and from Linden, Elrond is kind of sent by Gil-galad to just rally as many men as he can to try and fight these orcs, but they're losing all their battles.
It's what Elrond is just said to do is a delaying action more than anything.
Yeah. I do have.
I don't think this particular war involved the men. It was pretty much
the northern men formed an alliance with the dwarves, and they're just collateral damage. So in the area of like the Misty Mountains and such, they were just there to fend off the occasional raids from orcs and such. Now with this concerted attack, they kind of are being harassed and they're being thrown up the mountains, and the men can't really do anything. When the dwarves like close their doors, the men are screwed, so they just flee, they just migrate. But I'll talk about them a little bit later. But during all of this, Sauron didn't actually account for the dwarves. He never thought about them in the first place. He doesn't consider them in his military strategy, and it was actually an error, because when he's overrunning Eredor, a lot of the elves they flee near a place called Khazad-dûm, and this is where Durin's folk is. Durin the Third is
The
reigning.
Bridge of Khazad-dûm folks in the movie.
Yeah. So Durin the Third, he actually sorties because he is friends with Celebrimbor and the elves. They have been working together, and he attacks the forces of Sauron, and he allows a lot of the elves to go through, and then he closes his gates, and they can't break them. So Sauron is actually he'll never forget this. He's very pissed by what the dwarves did, and even the Galadrim, so the elves that are all the way, in Mirkwood, we would call it, in Lothlorien, even some of those elves kind of helped out as well. In the meantime, Elrond, he flees north to form what is called Rivendell. Its actual name is Imladris, and he basically gets besieged. Him and a shit ton of refugees are just stuck there, and they're in a siege for a very long time.
And it's also Lindon that's besieged simultaneously by Sauron's forces.
Yeah. But in the meantime, Sauron is now really pissed because the dwarves became involved. So he does tell his northern orcs to just attack everywhere in the Misty Mountains, and he scatters what is the Northmen. The Easterlings come in, and places like Gundabad are captured, which is very important to the dwarves. The Great Mountains are infested with orcs, and the dwarves basically do what they always do. They shut themselves in their mansions, and they just, they're like ostriches putting their heads in the sand for the most part.
Honestly, it just kind of makes me feel sad because you see in the Hobbit trilogy when the dwarves of the Iron Mountain come and you're like, oh man, these guys are pretty badass.
No, well, when the dwarves do want to fight, they are badass. I mean, we won't talk about this episode, but in the Third Age, there's a war called the War of the Dwarves and the Orcs, and all of the houses of the dwarves get involved. And it's
Is it the
brutal.
one that's alluded to in the Hobbit, like where Thorin was trying to take back his throne?
Yeah, it's a very long war, and it's very bloody. And actually, the what we call the Misty Mountain Orcs, or the Northern Orcs, I'll keep calling them, they don't come back. Like, their population is just destroyed for the rest of the Third Age because of that war. Yeah. Sauron has other motivations, though, other than just invasion. He wants to get all the rings of power. He gets most of them, but he doesn't have the 3 elven rings, which what he really wants. So Sauron is now turning towards Lindon. I'll bring up the map. This would be like...
And those rings were hidden, right? Because the moment they wore it, and Sauron had created the One Ring, it was like on that contact, the elven rulers who wore them realized what was happening, and they quickly removed it before he could get a grasp over them.
Now, Sauron is pushing Gil-galad's army to the River Lun and Mithlon, so he's winning grounds. This is about 1700 SA. But then, at the last moment, the Númenóreans start landing. And they're landing, in places around Lindon, where they form basically 2 different armies. One's further south, near Longdeer, one's near Lindon, and they start pincer attacking Sauron. Sauron then starts to lose a series of battles. He tries to get reinforcements at a place called Tharbad. I don't know if the map even has that location, but for those who know. And he's amphibiously assaulted because the Númenóreans are like infantry marine types. Sauron has nothing to do against them. Like, it's like Mike Tyson fighting an infant, And his army gets routed.
That's fucking...
Basically. And so he gets beaten in, I think, 3 or 4 different battles, all the way to Dagorlad. This is kind of just on the ways right into Mordor. And at the same time, Gil-galad rushes over to Imladris, and he relieves Elrond in his siege. So basically, Sauron's entire little war backfired massively on him.
Yeah, it said like his entire army's killed.
Yeah. Now, Sauron looks at this and he's back in Mordor. He's trying to cultivate more of the Easterlings and the Southrons, and he says to himself, I can't win this militarily. I have to form a new strategy. His enemy, of course, is not going to let up because Al-Farazon is landing now at Umbar and is marching on Mordor. And to this, Sauron just comes over and gives himself up as a hostage, surprisingly. And here we have,
I think, if I'm not mistaken, that happened a few hundred years later when
yes,
Sauron. So, because right now Sauron is just defeated, the elves take back their lands in whatever numbers they can, and because this is like around 1700 in the Second Age, year 1700.
oh, it's thousands. It's like 3,200 something when Fazaran lands and attacks him. It's been a long millennia almost, yeah. But time when you're reading this, it's like thousands of years. But yeah, so
Yeah,
Sauron, yeah,
no, I think this was the War of the Elves and Sauron, right? And just
yes,
after he, so yeah, because I think if I remember the timeline, this is just when Numenor starts to really expand its presence on Middle Earth.
yes,
Otherwise, they just had like a few settlements and trading relations, but they did not really have much of a presence. And this is where we see the true foundations for the kingdoms of the Númenóreans being founded here.
yeah. So I don't know. It can't be really seen so well on the map,
That
but
Southlands
Umbar
would
is
be
a
Gondor.
yeah. So Umbar would be a major coastal city that was formed by the Kingsmen. So everything that's in the south is more Kingsmen. Things in the north is more faithful as far as who's colonizing what. Peligir, which is it's a coastal port city for Gondor, is established. It's a refuge for men and elves and such. There's all sorts. There's Longdeer, there's Tharbad, there's all these outposts. And for a long time in the history, while the faithful were in charge, they came to Middle Earth and they played nice with the middlemen and they taught them things, like how to do agriculture, all this and that. But as the Kingsmen take over, they start to straight up enslave them. And they abuse them, they use them for slave labor. And I won't talk about it. It'll be when Sauron gets involved, it gets even worse. But basically, they're abusing the middlemen now, and they're becoming more evil. They're becoming colonizers and such. And then they go to war with Sauron, and before they know it, Sauron just gives himself up willingly. And then you have this long period of history where Sauron starts off as a prisoner, and then he becomes an advisor directly to King Fazaron, Ar-Fazaron. And the king more and more listens to Sauron as he tells him things like, you know what? You've been screwed over by the Valar. Actually, why can't you go to the Undying Lands? You should do things like worship Melkor because he was the true ruler of Arda. And to worship Melkor, you should do human sacrifice. And I actually have one piece of art, I think someone drew. Where is it? It's yeah. So this is like what it would look like on Numenor. So it's horrifying. So they start taking middlemen or the faithful and they start sacrificing them, and this causes more and more of the faithful to depart Numenor to the colonies because they're being persecuted. Sauron is basically trying to edge them on to invade the Undying Lands to go against the Valar.
And honestly, he doesn't just give a shit about like controlling the Númenóreans. He knows he really
Yeah,
cannot.
yeah.
He just wants to get rid of them.
But he's presented as kind of this great wizard advisor figure. They look up to him, and Sauron, he's kind of showing himself a little bit in the end. But anyways,
I think
they
he's
spin.
working on like the seeds of doubts that had that had been planted like centuries ago before he was here, right when the Númenóreans start to question the Valar.
And for he gets them finally to agree. The king says, "Yeah, we're going to invade Valar because we'll just go to those Undying Lands, and then we will gain immortality." So they spend a long time building this massive armada to
I think
invade.
I'll just add one thing just
Mhm.
before this: the fact that in the couple of centuries before this invasion, they even like banned anyone from contacting the elves or speaking the elvish languages. It's
Yeah.
literally like
It's a
you know
long
you
it's a
got
long history I just can't get into. But yeah, they do all sorts of horrible things. They attack elves that come to Numenor, then they don't allow them to come because the elves would periodically bring gifts of flowers and stuff to them. They're enslaving all the men of Middle Earth, using them as human sacrifices. They're doing other grotesque things. They burn the sacred tree, everything, and then they invade the Undying Lands. They actually do invade and take over like a very small town, by the way, insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
they did take a lot of time to build up. It wasn't like a rushed invasion because the Great Armament period was literally almost a decade.
Yeah, and the Valar do get involved. They literally just drown Numenor. They destroy all of the invaders, all of their ships, and they change the world again. It's actually for the last time, destroying Numenor. And now the only survivors of the Númenóreans are those kingsmen that are in the south, that are in places like Umbar, for example, and the faithful, who are in the northern reaches into places that will eventually become the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. And Sauron was killed for the first time. Yes, it would be the first time he drowns with the rest of them, cackling like a madman because he was actually in the religious temple on Numenor laughing when he got them to do this. It's never explained how his one ring gets back to him. That is always confused me. But anyways, his spirit leaves after he is drowned, and it goes back to Mordor, where he slowly has to rebuild his body. But he there is a repercussion to him, quote unquote, dying this time. He is no longer able to change forms, like to his fair form, and he is only able to appear as the Sauron that we know, this dark clad
It
form, like
looks
Morgoth used to be.
awesome though.
Yeah. And
One thing
ironically,
I will
the
just always
Eastern
say.
orcs actually respect him now because he doesn't look like a princess.
Well, I mean, with that great mace, the fact that he's just like, hitting home runs with scores of men and elves.
Yeah, yeah.
That's if I were an orc, I would respect that.
Mhm. And so he defeated Numenor. He achieved his goal, and he takes on his terrible form. And now the Eastern orcs do they abide by him
Bolster his
because
army.
yeah, because Sauron can only use fear to control now. That's something that should be noted. Before, he was using gifts, just like respect, like any other ruler
He
would
was
do.
pretty
Now he
manipulative,
rules through fear. Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, he's
and
corrupted.
I think one reason why you could say like the men who will now be fighting from now on, right, the descendants of Númenor, they're a bit weaker because only 4 or 5
Yes,
ships of Númenóreans survived, led by Gil-galad, Elendil and his sons, and that was the formation of Arnor and Gondor. So, like the settlements that were already there, they now expanded to become kingdoms, with Umbar actually staying loyal to the king. So they are now known as the Black Númenóreans.
yes, and
But
they're called the Dunedain now instead of Númenóreans. They're called the Dunedain, and their lifespans will decrease as they procreate with the middlemen. So
mhm,
their blood thins out a little bit, but the
but
royal families do retain most of it.
they're still very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, they're still 8 feet tall, like god people. So yeah.
True. It's actually like so I don't quoting this from the Lord of the Rings, or it's just more of actually recounting a memory when the siege of Gondor is about to start in the books, and Prince Imrahil arrives with I think 100 knights of Arnor to reinforce the defenses of Gondor. The way Tolkien made it sound, now I can't remember that exact paragraph, but the way he described it, that feeling still is with me. It just sounds like you're not getting just 100 knights, you're getting like an army of like 50 to 60,000 men reinforcing you. The way they were just speaking in awe of the Knights of Arnor that Prince
Hmm.
Imrahil led. And so that's really like, the power of Numenor, even 3,000 years after its destruction. And the powers are diluted, but they're still so powerful. And Why do you think I really love the Númenóreans? But and just one thing, I'll just get back to Sauron. The fact that he doesn't want to control things he knows he cannot control is it's something that really separates him from Morgoth.
Oh yeah, I should mention Sauron in the Second Age is more powerful than Morgoth was at the end of the First Age, and people might be like surprised to hear that because Morgoth is, he's one of the highest of the beings, whereas Sauron is like
And not to mention, Morgoth
archangel.
Melkor was considered the strongest of the Valar.
Yeah. The reason why is Morgoth created his own ring, which was Arda. So when he corrupted Arda, he marred it, as Tolkien said. He infused his power into Arda to do whatever he does. So anything he corrupts, any mountain he makes, all the things that he's molding and manipulating, it takes away power from himself. And it also physically binds him more and more to Arda. That's important
I think it's
also. So
also the fact that he does it so quickly and rapidly, so it's not like his powers
yes.
generate back.
Mhm. Well, he spends his power, and he spends it making all of his armies during the First Age, all of his wars. Sauron then inherits all of this because he doesn't have to make they corrupt all of these things into being. It's all just sitting there. He has to just convolute them to his will and get them to obey him. When he creates the One Ring, that's actually Sauron's. That's
Creation,
what
you could
screwed
say.
him. Yeah, yeah.
Because he poured a lot of his life force into it, but that's what saves his life.
It's
At
what
the end
saves his life, but it's also what makes his weakness. Morgoth's weakness was he divulged too much of his power and he weakened himself so that he could be
It just
destroyed.
reminds me of one video I saw, like, parody group, where you find the Dark Lord and you have to find the obvious weak spot. But I think why I wanted to speak about Sauron and his strategy is, if it was Morgoth in the Second Age, right? Like, let's just assume that he would have tried to control Númenor outright, or defeat them by brute force.
Mhm. Yeah,
Sauron,
he didn't have much thinking. He wasn't very
he's a brute. He doesn't have strategic sense. Sauron, the way he destroyed Númenor, like, sure, it did cost him his ability to transform and move amongst the elves.
Oh, worth it. For history, it was a very good play.
But the fact that he just got rid of, like, what, 99% of super soldiers, it's brilliant. And another thing is, he never, like, we never know how many Balrogs really lived and served Melkor. We know it'll be at least a dozen under
It's 3
Gothmog.
or 4 or something, yeah.
No, I don't think it is. It's just not known. We just know the names of two, Gothmog and Durin's Bane. We don't know for sure because some suggest there were, because when Ungoliath harmed Melkor and he screamed, right? We know it's the way it's described is there are several, way more than 5, 6 Balrogs at least. It sounds like that came to his aid. So that's where I disagree with you for 4. But we don't know the true number. But Sauron never really went after them to recruit them to his cause.
No, because they're equals. The Balrogs are the same as him. They're corrupted Unmaiar, so they're at the same power level. When he has the ring, perhaps he could, like
But
Smaug or another dragon. It's the same thing. Perhaps he could dominate them, but they're on equal level in power. So Durin's Bane, for example, yeah,
he just hid. And I think it's also the fact that Sauron knew that they only really would serve Morgoth. I know, because, like, I guess maybe I'm just quoting Shadow of Mordor again, or War or Mordor. When that powerful shaman of the orcs wants to summon the
oh yeah, the Balrog, and then you fight
Balrog.
with Yavanna. Yeah.
But
I mean, yeah, I like the
think
game, but it's still silly.
But I really do think that they would not obey Sauron willingly. As you said, right, they're equals. And he's smart enough to know that it's not really worth the effort of trying to get them. So it's just more that strategic insight that Sauron really has in knowing how to operate is just makes him a really amazing character.
Much more so than Morgoth. And like I was saying,
Emo
so
kid with
Morgoth,
daddy issues. That's it.
yeah.
I always love using that term.
So Morgoth, he loses basically by infusing his power into Arda. Sauron inherits all that, so he doesn't have to use his power to dominate orcs. He just, he's just a ruler. He just gets them to come under his banner. But when he makes the One Ring, then he has done the exact same mistake that Morgoth did. He infused his power into this ring, and it is his vulnerability. It is binding him to Arda, and if it's destroyed, he'll be destroyed. So in many ways, it does make him more powerful. It heightens his dominance, let's say, but it's also his weakness. So now Sauron knows he defeated Númenor, and he realizes that his enemies are probably going to come and get him. So he starts to rally all the orcs, the Easterlings, the Haradrim, Black Númenóreans, and it's said that even some dwarves fight on his side. We don't know who, but you can imagine it must have been some of the houses in the east. And they start to, strike first. They go after what is Gondor, this kingdom in exile. He leads a surprise attack on Minas Ithil. Isildur and his family end up fleeing to Arnor, leaving Anarion to defend Osgiliath and Minas Arnor.
And I think that was Minas Ithil also Anarion was defending from Sauron's forces.
But Sauron has kind of given up what he's doing. So all of these people who are fleeing north, they run over to, places like Imeldris, and they meet with the representatives, I guess, in Arnor. So this would be in Amun Sol. So Elendil, Gil-galad, everybody who's in the know joins.
Amunsul was called Weathertop, right?
Is Amun Sol weather? I don't know if it's. Yeah, it's the meeting point. Yeah, I guess it would have been.
You're talking about that hill I think that's the place where Frodo got stabbed, right? By the Nazgûl.
Not sure if it's the same place, but it's a significant place in Arnor in the beginning. And so the elves, I guess if you wanted to call factions, the elves of Lindon and the Imeldris, they join up with the Arnorian forces, and they're like, hey, we got to go down and just get rid of Sauron. We're going to fight him. So they form something called the Last Alliance. As they start marching together, they cross, the Misty Mountains, and the dwarves of now Durin the Fourth, they end up joining with them to finally face off against Sauron.
Can I also just say that even though they met and formalized an alliance, they only moved out after like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like it's an instantaneous thing. This is like hundreds of years. But yeah, so they're marching.
But I guess let's just say that they prepared properly.
And then they also come across the other groups of elves that I keep mentioning. So they're led by King Oropher and King Amdir. So this isn't Mirkwood and Lothlorien, but it's the precursors to them, we can call
Greenwood
it.
And Lorien.
Yeah. It's Greenwood the Great and the Galadrim, they would be called back then. And they all get together. And the first major battle is on the plains of Dagorlad. The alliance, it's joining up with the Gondorian forces, and they're trying to get information, and everybody's doing their part, but those elves in the east, led by Oropher and Amdir, they're basically kind of foolish and childish, and they suddenly charge into Sauron's forces. They get cut off from the rest of the men.
I think they were a bit angry at the men, and they thought that they could just win it on their own with the glory.
Yeah, because they thought they had the numbers, yeah.
Yeah, and especially since it did go against Gil-galad's orders, who I think Gil-galad was appointed like the supreme commander. And
he's the supreme commander, but they don't respect him because they don't consider themselves like under the Noldor.
Yeah, but I think Gil-galad and Elendil were the number 1 and 2, right? Formally speaking.
Exactly. And they get absolutely destroyed. Both kings are slain, and a large portion of them are killed. And this is a battle that lasted months, apparently. Eventually, Gil-galad and Elendil's forces, they are able to overwhelm Sauron's armies, and they break through Cirith Gorgor, and then they start getting, into Mordor itself. And if people have seen, the movies...
Orfor's son, Thranduil.
Yeah, Thranduil is Orfor's son. Whereas the other forces are going to fall under Galadriel. This is the formation of Mirkwood and Lothlorien in the third age.
That opening cinematic of the Lord of the Rings.
That's why I chose the picture. It's directly from the movie.
Yeah, so especially like if you just like that part where you see like, and they show like both armies are marching side by side. So because on the elven side, you see it like it's more of that golden hue, right? Because of the glint of their armors. And the men, it's more silver, kind of like,
Mm.
Gondor, Arnor types. And that arrow just going past Elrond. I think it was Elrond that
Yeah,
they're
it's
trying to.
Elrond.
Yeah. The fact that they're just, it just goes like just by his side and he doesn't even look phased.
So they're fighting in Mordor. It's actually they're performing a siege of Barad-dûr, and it lasts for 7 years. Sauron is up in the towers throwing what Tolkien described as missiles, so could be magical weapons. We don't actually know what he's throwing, but it's something that he did say it was arrows. So something was being thrown down. They took a lot of casualties. Within Golgoroth, Anarion was hit by a stone. And he ends up getting killed. But after 7 years, Sauron is like, he has no choice. He actually comes out to face them. And it's that big scene in the Fellowship of the Ring where he's just beating the shit out of people and knocking them around.
It's like I think what you see at least 20 elves and men like in the cutscenes just being thrown
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. And as everybody knows, he's taken down all these guys. He engages Gil-galad in Elendil in combat, manages to, kill him, and then just as he's going to hit Isildur, he uses his sword. Well, actually, it's fragments of Narsil. He cuts the one ring from Sauron's hand, and Sauron is utterly destroyed, never comes back, and everyone lives happily ever after. That's how the Second Age kind of ends.
I would just say there was like this one game I used to play on my Xbox. Shit, man, I can't remember what was the name. It's not Battle for Middle Earth.
Battle for Middle Earth. Oh my god.
No, it's not that. There was like one moment. I'm trying to recall that game. So you kind of like just play with different classes. I used to play this so much on my Xbox. Like you would have the warrior, archer, mage, and scout.
I'm not sure what game that is.
Ah, shit, man, I can't recall it.
I mean,
Yeah.
there was that one game that was like, it was the same as Battlefront, but for Lord of the Rings. Wasn't that Battle for Middle Earth? Or what was it called?
Yes, Lord of the Rings Conquest.
Conquest. Yeah. Could have
Yeah.
been better. I didn't hate it. Could have been better.
I know, but what I was getting to, when you play the alternative campaign where you take control of Sauron's forces. First of all,
Yeah.
the first mission was pretty awesome because you only play as a Nazgul.
Yeah.
And when you get to the Siege of Rivendell and the missions at Weathertop and Destruction of the Shire, the hero that you get is Sauron. And I think him and Aragorn are the best heroes to play with in that game. And like Sauron is just like, oh, you would just be marching and destroying the elves or men, etc. It is amazing to play with him.
And I know you didn't have to ask the questions, but for the audience, there was like 10 questions that were involved in this, but like 5 of them are just basically answered by me just retelling kind of the Second Age history the way I did. But are there any other questions you had?
I think maybe we could just talk about like the strength of the armies, maybe, because I know you've done that in Wizards and Warriors, so maybe you could just want to briefly describe and talk about the armies of the Second Age.
So obviously, before its destruction, Númenor is the strongest. They can overwhelm everybody. Once Númenor has fallen, the realms in exile, they're populating by mingling with middlemen, so they're decreasing the strength of their Númenórean blood, but they are making numbers. So Gondor and Arnor do become significant. The elves are very much diminished for high elves. I will differentiate them. So the high elves are Lindon and Eredor. They've been dramatically reduced, whereas the two kingdoms of, don't call them lower elves, but the Galadrim and the Sylvian elves, I'll just call them Sylvian elves, it's easier. They're numerous. There's actually quite a lot of them, but
That is where Orfor and his companions were from.
Yeah, but 2/3 of them are destroyed in this war. They're the
all
most
thanks to the
casualties.
king's arrogance.
Yep, because the kings didn't want to listen to Gil-galad and they just rushed forward, and they took the fall that they took. Other than that, dwarves are not numerous in general, but Durin's folk, which is not just the Longbeards, it's also the refugees from Belagos and Nalgarod. So you have the fire beards and the broad beams. I think that's what they were called. There's the two other clans. They're part of Durin's folk, so they're like a cosmopolitan group. All the other dwarfs in the east, maybe some of them fought on Sauron's side. We're not told who's doing what, but there wouldn't have been, I guess, too many of them. Of course, there's Easterlings and Southrons, but
Yeah, I
they're
think the
not.
dwarves Sauron found just the stubbornness was very difficult for him to even control. So I guess I could agree that there would be some amount of dwarves fighting for Sauron, but probably like a very minuscule. Because I remember reading in Sauron's armies, his orcs and Uruk-hai were just cannon fodder, whereas the hard-hitting punches of his armies, if we just go like lower accurate, would be the Haradrim and Easterlings,
Yeah,
the
of
men.
course, they're the real strength of his armies. It's more in the Second Age. It's much more of the Easternlings at this point. I don't think the Haradrim are. They're not fully under his grasp because he was contested by the Númenóreans, who were they're colonizing the area. So while no one's touching the Easternlings, he doesn't have as many of the Southrons. But I mean, we don't actually know numbers, right? I tried to do these calculations in my episodes based off of scholarly work, but it's like we don't actually know numbers.
Uh, like if you see like what Tolkien has written in his books, the numbers are not massive in the Third Age, right? Like the Battle of the Fire Armies, literally, if you combine the Allied forces up, I'm going to use that term loosely to talk about the
Yeah,
dwarves, men, and elves. I think it's what 3,000 strong at most,
yeah. No,
as
the
per the
Second Age is
Hobbit.
enormous compared to this, and the First Age is much more bigger.
Yeah, it's like um, and we know if we take the movies and everything and the books, right? The Rohirrim are coming with about 7,000 men total. And this is including the wild men they actually pick up, which it's not shown in the movies, but it is in the books,
Yeah.
right? The wild men who help them pass through the mountains quickly. That's actually why the Rohirrim arrived much more faster to Gondor than because the movie doesn't
Yeah.
really show it. They just say it's
Yeah. There's
3 days
a
ride.
lot they had to cut out. Yeah, there's a lot that they had to cut out. But
Uh,
I mean, in the Second Age, it's the last gasp of the elves, really, because after
it,
the Sylvian elves take this hit, they diminish also into the Third Age. So
and a
all
lot
the
of the
elves in general.
Noldor and a good chunk of the remaining Noldor do depart for Valinor.
Yeah, after they defeat Sauron, they think it's all over, and I mean that's in the Third Age. You see it; the elves are just leaving for the Undying Lands. It's their time to go, so their population just basically never really replenishes.
Yeah, but the second age, right? Like, okay, I guess technically the second age is when the siege of Paradur ends, or when Isildur is slain. What's the official turning point?
Yeah.
So, if you were to just consider it in the immediate few years after defeating Sauron, Gil-galad and a lot of the elves do leave. So, there are going to be like a maybe say 10,000 Noldor or so, you could say, easy, that live under Elrond's command, but they are slowly departing. And what we see in the movie is pretty much just like the last groups that are departing. So it's only the Sylvian elves that are going to be the dominant elven species left on the continent.
Yeah, and in the Third Age, they do partake in the War of the Ring, but Linda and Rivendell and that they're so insignificant population wise that yeah, it doesn't really matter. So the last alliance battle is really the coming of men, and men will control the events of the Third Age. This is the last breath of the elves, you would say. Numenor is gone. Sauron is not dead. He doesn't even understand this himself at the beginning, but the One Ring was not destroyed, obviously,
The
in the
One
Third
Ring is
Age.
going to be spending time with the real Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
the river.
I don't know if there's anything else because I'm looking at all the questions you had, and I kind of covered all of them, like the formation, preparation, the Battle of Last Alliance, Sauron and Numenor's collapse.
Yeah.
We covered capture of
Yeah.
Sauron.
Yeah, I think it's just like because we've talked a lot about Sauron, because I think Sauron is definitely the most important character
Yeah,
of
definitely
this.
in the Second Age. Yeah.
And he is interesting if you really look at it. Uh, let's talk about another favorite character of ours, not directly related to the questions. Glorfindel.
What about him?
just anything.
I mean, he's just this fantastic, warrior character.
He was the one who slayed the Balrogs, right? But
I
I'm
find him
surprised.
I find him bizarre as a character too.
How come?
He's kind of this overpowered adventurer character that is in the background.
Yeah. And I think people don't realize that in the book, when Frodo, Aragorn are fleeing the Nazgul, Arwen is not the one who's come
No, it's
to.
him. Yeah,
And I think what he just fought off the Nazgul with ease
yeah, of
to
course.
let Frodo go through.
But I think after that, I think that's pretty much answers like everything you had, and
Yeah, even I would also say that.
I think we've gone on long enough. I don't know how the audience is going to respond to these Lord of the Ring episodes. Of course, we're going to have one more. Well, actually, we might have multiple more on the Third Age because that one's
I
really
think
long.
we could do like a summary for the Third Age soon, and then perhaps give justice to the Noldor elves and their history, the Númenóreans, the wars, maybe in a bit more detail. We could have dedicated episodes of that in the future.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But before I let the audience go, I just wanted to say if you'd like to further support this channel, please consider checking out the YouTube membership or the Patreon account at www.patreon.com/the Pacific War Channel. By joining either of these, you get access to the exclusive podcast series, early access to all the content I make, and voting rights to the subjects I will tackle next. And if you do like Tolkien stuff, I do have exclusive episodes over there looking into all sorts of facets of it. Yeah. So thanks, Garev, and until next time, we'll be talking about the Third Age.
Looking forward to it. I think that's when the hobbits take center stage. So what we want to call it, the coming of the hobbits.
Coming of the Hobbits. Yeah, sure. All right.
All right.